Okay. We have two aspects of this class, and one is just the Whispers itself, and the other is the poem Samadhi, which is part of the Whispers. How many of you have yet to memorize the poem Samadhi? Oh, goody, quite a few of you. Then you'll be very pleased to know. Half. We have made up for you, I'll just talk about this. This is Swami Kriyananda reading the poem Samadhi 15 times. So that's a good place to start. This is off of his recording of Autobiography of a Yogi. So one way to learn it is just to listen to it until you can't hardly stand to listen to it anymore. And then I have also made up here, which I'm going to do a little bit later in the class, but this is just, I didn't give you my incredibly complicated tips for learning Samadhi because I realized that most people couldn't relate to them. So I've given you my very simplified form of this. And if any of you want my extremely complicated form, which I realized was just a look into my own mind rather than a real service to anyone, but we'll also deal with this also. So just part of our exercise, and even if you don't end up fully memorizing it, at least we can immerse ourselves in it a little bit more. Jason? Oh, that's all right. Pardon me? We're in Whispers, a class about Whispers from Eternity. Pardon me? I think it's 3. Yeah, because it's leading us into Christmas. Yeah. We stopped the other one for December because we thought this was more Christmassy. Because even though it's very early December, it seems like it's never too early to get ready to feel like devotional spirit of Christmas, and we thought this one would do it. Okay? And the poem Samadhi is an extremely good thing to know or almost know for the long meditation. It'll get you out of a lot of tough spots in the long meditation. Okay. So, I'll try to speak up a little. I don't have a big voice tonight, maybe, but thank you for reminding me. I'm over a cold, but thank you for reminding me because I have to put out a little more energy. It's a little gruff, and I'm not using it very hard. I'll use it harder. All right, we are now doing the book Whispers from Eternity. This is Swami Kriyananda's newly edited version of this. I did this class once before with a master's original version without Swami's editing. But it seemed like it would be worthwhile to bring it up to date with this book. As most of you know, but perhaps not all of you, Yogananda, Master, wrote this book, 1929. He revised it himself in 1949, but there weren't a lot of changes made to it. And then after he died, one of his disciples massively re-edited it, and so the book didn't even resemble the original. And so for a while, you couldn't really get the right book. And then there was such a hue and cry about it that Self-Realization Fellowship actually reissued the original 1949 edition, which was what became known as the red version of Whispers from Eternity. But it came out in litigation, SRF's litigation against us, that the original book was in the public domain. So because the original version of it was not available in India, we decided that Ananda would publish it, Crystal Clarity would publish it, because in India all you could get was the edited version, which was a travesty. And we couldn't keep carrying the books over, it was just a mess. And you bought them in the West, they were too expensive, so we needed a cheap Indian edition. So they prepared the whole thing, absolutely loyal to the original, presented it to Swamiji, just showing it to him just before it was going to go to the printer. And this was last summer. And he starts looking at it, and he just felt profoundly, one, that it needed editing, and two, that Master wanted him to edit it. So in a state of complete distress to the publishing company, our publishing company, he decided he would edit the book, and he just started editing it. And I happened to be up there at the time, and I got drawn into, some of you may remember, I got drawn into typing. He edited it with a pen by hand. He felt that was just how he had to do it. And then I edited his handwritten changes made it into a manuscript. And he worked day and night for about 2 weeks, I think. I'm trying to remember exactly how long it was. And I sat there too and worked 2 weeks on it. He was in his apartment. I set up a little desk. Those of you who know his place, in the little anteroom where Miriam keeps her medications. And he would do the pages, and he would either bring them out to me or I would go in and get them. Usually he would bring them out to me because I couldn't keep up with him. He could edit faster than I could type. And he edited it through just one time through, and usually he edits many times through. He edited it one time through, made many, many changes on the pages. He didn't change the concepts, he just changed the presentation of it. But then he only went through it very casually once more, because he felt it was, he just wanted to clean it up. He didn't want to change it as he put it into his book. He really needed to stay Master's book. So then he published this, which is the first time Swami's ever edited one of Master's books where a person could actually just sit and compare one to one. And at the beginning there was a certain kind of hue and cry about it, because many people really loved this book. Swamiji said, including him, he really loved this book too. But when you really started looking at the way Master wrote it, as Swamiji, in an exaggerated say, there were just so many mixed images that sometimes you really couldn't tell where you were going. You know, the submarine of my mind dives deep in the lily pads, through the lily pads of distractions, looking for the pearl of deep meditation. I mean, that doesn't really happen, but that's sort of what you're dealing with. And you're really not quite sure from start to finish where you're going. So what Swamiji did is he just made all the images much clearer, and where necessary, sort of thinned it down a little bit or took away repetition. He was extremely careful, and after he was completely done editing, he had Nirmala and Dharmadas sit with his edited version and Master's original, I think both originals, the 29 and the 49, I think is how they did it, or maybe they were just working with one. And he had them compare poem by poem to make sure that he hadn't either left out something important or changed something that shouldn't be changed. And they were very, attentive to it. And Swamiji made a few changes, because of little things that they pointed out, even very small things, because he didn't want to do anything except make Master's image come more clear. And certainly many of us who are familiar with both versions, this is simply easier to understand. And it's easier to memorize too, because the images are more consistent. It's not such an effort to hold the images in your mind. And he edited also the poetry a little bit, although of course a poem like Samadhi he didn't touch, and a few others. But the net result for all of us, we feel, is a real improvement. So that's what we're working with. And one doesn't dispute Swami's right to do it. I mean, one may dispute his right to do it, but I don't dispute his right to do it. So, what this book is about, and it's really described right at the beginning. Swamiji says in his forward, in his preamble is how he calls it. He says, Swami says first, I consider this book the supreme contribution, spiritually speaking, of my life. Which is really a startling statement, isn't it? Because studying this great work carefully once more at this late stage of my own life, Swami writes, I see that my Guru took every conceivable situation in which the sincere God-seeker might find himself and showed him the best possible attitude with which to cope spiritually. Now, isn't that interesting? That is the realization that I came to when I taught this class a number of years ago, the first time. What I suddenly saw in this was that through all of these, what Swami describes later, Master's veritable tide wave of almost overwhelming bliss, is how he describes this book. He puts you in a situation where you're being criticized. How do you respond to that? In a situation in which you're out of money, how do you respond to that? In a situation in which you're facing loss, how do you respond to that? In a situation when you really want to help people, how do you respond to that? And even though at first when you're reading the book, you don't recognize necessarily that that's what's being told to you. Because one, it's poetic. Two, it's very fanciful and imaginative. And three, it's so permeated with overwhelming bliss, we don't recognize ourselves necessarily in those situations. We have the thought that if something's wrong, I should be miserable. And so when he manifests a very difficult situation through extraordinarily elevated, exuberant, positive images, it doesn't occur to us that he's modeling for us our correct behavior. So that's one aspect of it, which is it is profound, serious, spiritual teaching about how to cope with the everyday situations of life. And so we need to start reading this book with that thought in mind. The second thing is, quite self-evidently, because he calls the book a book of answered prayers, it's a book on how to pray. And once again, we don't necessarily recognize it because Master just moves the goalposts so far from where we think they would be in terms of how we're supposed to pray that we just think of this book as something else. Because our own ideas, which I'll read some sections here in a few moments, about how we're supposed to relate to God, just don't have this exuberant familiarity. And Master takes us to task for that. You know, this book is really way far into Dwapara Yuga, in the sense that the limitations of Kali Yuga that have so permeated our understanding of spirituality are just completely, just knocked aside without any consideration. And he doesn't do it, he has an introduction in which he talks about it, but he just pushes aside what he describes as the medieval attitude of God as some tyrant who must be flattered or persuaded, or supplicated into actually doing what we want him to do. And I love that phrase. He calls it medieval. Our concept of how to relate to God is medieval. And, the whole biblical images we have in the New Testament, it's all about kings. It's all about kings and servants and slaves and courtiers. And because in Kali Yuga, this is how people thought about things. And this is how society was organized. Very strongly along caste and social and position. And the external was how we understood things. And everybody had their position. And you couldn't move out of your position. You were where you were. And those who had power had absolute power over other people. And if you wanted something from them, you had to go follow very careful channels. And you were always in a powerless position compared to the one who had power over you. So naturally, when we thought who is literally called the King of Kings, we just took this and magnified it, a bazillion times. And so until we were always thinking of God's power and our desire, to have a piece of that help us, but we don't put ourselves in the position that Master is talking about, which is we are children of God, and what belongs to the Father belongs to us. This was the grave error that Jesus sought to correct when he started talking about God the Father. And when he started talking about, we're all sons of God. We can become sons of God. And he spoke of himself as a son, and all of us as belonging to God. And if you ask your father for a loaf of bread, will he give you a stone? And so many images of God as the Father was trying to correct what the Jews had developed by that point, which was God as the judge. So maybe he was partly the king and he was partly the judge, but it was always about weighing and measuring. It was not a relationship where the warmth of it and the care of it could be assumed. So Master describes for us that this beggarly attitude and this profound fundamental misunderstanding makes us extremely ineffective in our prayers. And so he wants to really teach us what real prayer is about. And in his introduction here, he speaks, and we should talk about it a little bit. Okay, there's a few things that I want to say. First he talks about, and this is an amazing essay, we should demand as children of God, not pray as beggars. And he makes a few statements to support that. God made man in his own image. But then he says, why is it then that so many of our wishes remain unfulfilled? And why do so many of God's children suffer? Very important questions. And then he says God is divinely impartial. So he could not have made one child better than any other. Even a good human father treats his children fairly. And then Master just tells us quite simply, man suffers because of his own past actions. And he says, somewhere, sometime in the past, all men have broken various laws of God and have accordingly brought about what Master calls lawful results. You know, that you break a law and then the law acts against you. Master makes no attempt to really explain the entire law of karma and how that works, but he makes that as a statement because what he's setting forth for us is the right attitudes that we have to have in order to be able to pray effectively. And there's this remarkable balance that we have to have, and it's interesting, this coincides exactly with the other class we've been doing, where it's all about the law of karma and how fair it is. So Master says we have to start from the fact that wherever we're standing, somehow or another we got ourselves in this position. And whatever consequences we are presently experiencing are the lawful results of whatever we did that was not in harmony with divine law, or that doesn't even mean that it's out of harmony, it just means that we act in certain ways and certain results come. And then he says, God has given us absolute liberty to reason as we choose. In other words, we can think whatever we want about the situation. God doesn't inhibit our private thoughts. And we use our reason in order to determine what we think is the right action. And misuse of one's God-given reason leads to sin, he says, which infallibly brings suffering. Meaning that we use our free will to choose a course of action, and if that course of action is not based on the divine laws of happiness, then we fall into ignorance, which is called sin, and then we suffer. And the right use of reason, which is to say to use our God-given free will to cooperate with the laws of happiness, lead to joy and happiness. It is we who punish ourselves, he said, or reward ourselves. God's responsibility ended when he first endowed man with reason and free will. These are very challenging statements, but this is what he said. However, we have misused our independence, he says. So let's go here. That is why we have forsaken our claim to dominion over the Lord's creation. So then we find ourselves, because we're no longer in tune with our Maker, we can't influence this creation in the way that we want to, which is, I want to be young, I want to not be old, I want to be healthy, I want to be rich, I want to not be alone, I want people to like me, I want to be sweeter than I am, whatever it may be. You know, we have these certain conditions, and we no longer have the ability by our divinely given power to shift that reality merely because we want to. We've lost that ability. Now, this book is talking about how to get that ability back, interestingly, because Master's trying to teach us how to come back into our divine inheritance by right use of willpower, concentration, and meditation. It's really, Master makes, his promises are not puny. He doesn't just say, oh, you'll feel a little better, or maybe you'll be able to pay the rent. He promises us that we'll have dominion over all creation, because once we restore our right understanding of our relationship to God, everything that belongs to the Father belongs to me. And this is, of course, manifested by the awakened sons, which are souls like Jesus or like Master, who could just play with the material plane if they chose to. Often they allowed it to run its course, but how often in the Bible we have these stories of how Jesus just simply intervened. Someone was dead and he raised them, or in Autobiography of a Yogi, someone was ill and he cured him. The story of between Master Sri Yukteswar and Lahiri Mahashaya, of Sri Yukteswar being thin and sick and well, and Lahiri says, "Oh, you think yourself ill," and then all of a sudden he's ill again. "Oh, you think yourself thin," and then he's thin. "You think yourself robust," and suddenly he's robust. I mean, just playing with this world where all the rest of us drag around. Well, Master wants us to understand, because we have misused our reason and our will and have chosen paths in our many incarnations that have caused us to believe that we're separate, then we've lost it. But by the right use of our attunement, which he teaches us in this book, we can recapture it. So we should not in any way say, "Yeah, but." We should say, "Yes, absolutely, sir. Let's do it." Okay?
But I am saying, "Yeah, but."
Don't.
I don't imagine that someone, once I recover that, I'm going to go around manifesting money and cars and houses and stuff.
No, because in order to reconnect with the divine, I'll read the line here. The sleeping immortal refuses to receive the divine light fully because he doesn't want to clarify his own consciousness. So you have to clarify your consciousness before you can receive that divine power. And in clarifying your consciousness, you develop the purity not to do something stupid with that power. How's that? Or if you do gain sufficient power and then misuse it by your false reasoning, then you simply lose it again. And I think we've been there and done that quite a few times.
Yes, but you're telling us, the Master is saying, you can have all these things if you just...
You can have dominion over creation. That's quite a different statement than saying you can have houses, cars, and money. There are people who say, you can have houses, cars, and money. And then they try to operate a piece of this law. And if you operate a piece of this law sufficiently, you may be able to manifest housing, cars, and money. But will you have happiness and peace of mind? That's the question. Will you have true wealth? In other words, by the misuse of your reason, you may get things that you think you want, but if in doing so, you are not in harmony with divine law, sooner or later you will fall into sin, and then you will find misery again. Because it's not happiness and peace of mind are not equated with just the ability to manifest things that you think you want. So what we really want to receive is dominion over creation, which is to say, mastery over ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yeah. If it's appropriate for your situation, to have, whatever.
Right.
Swami's got, seemingly, you could look at Swami and go, right, he's got this house here, this house there.
Yeah, you could look at...
Equipment for this, but he uses it all to serve.
Right. Yeah. And you could look at Swamiji and you could see him from many different angles, depending on what angle you see him from. There are people who know that he's misusing his position. They know that he's taking money. They know that he's dominating people. They know that he's using his power unwisely because they can't imagine that someone with that position wouldn't, because they see life through their own lens. Right? Fair enough. Brenda? Pass it over to Brenda. Uh-huh.
When you talk about losing,
It doesn't have to be in the room for it to be on the recording. It's the recording that we're concerned about. So let's hope for the best.
when you talk about
Well, forget it then.
when you talk about losing something, that sounds sort of like the Christian tradition of being in sin and having to come out of it.
Right?
I typically think of us as evolving from a less conscious state to a more conscious state, but never having really lost it, excepting on a daily basis when we lose it.
The Christian concept that you're generally the question is, what have we lost? We lose what we're talking about. What we lose is we lose awareness of. We do. But we're not. Okay, the word evolving is the difficulty you're raising, because divine consciousness is always complete. What evolves is our awareness of it. We're not. There's no point. Everything is a manifestation of divine consciousness. There is only one. There was one, and it vibrated. So the one vibrating gives the impression of separateness. But nothing has ever happened except movement from stillness. Now, you can only understand this to a certain point. But nothing evolves. All that we stop doing is we stop moving. And when we stop moving, we gradually come back to center. Moving is desires and suffering and misunderstanding and life and death and complete identification with all that movement that causes us to just want to keep moving. Isn't it so that once you get in motion, you want to just keep moving? That's what happens to the soul. The soul is manifested, whatever that means, manifested out from the heart of creation, and then we are given the free will to either want immediately to come back to stillness or to become hypnotized, enamored of the movement. And so we start getting excited by the movement, and lifetime after lifetime, even when we're slightly stilled by the process of death, we still carry the desire within us for the excitement of that movement. So as soon as possible, we get back into a physical body so we can do it again. We've reasoned it out. This is why Master says it's the misuse of reason. This is what we say every week in the Festival of Light. The bird is given a divine mission to be fruitful and multiply, and what you gain, share with others. But the bird, in flight for the first time, just out there, floating around, it's just an image, but you can see it, he begins to, just sort of think that this is really great. And he begins to forget what animates him. And he thinks that he's doing it himself. Isn't this what we see all around us? You see people all around you who have no concept of where even their life force comes from. They just think it's their own mind. And they just keep doing it and doing it. The false reasoning. And they get all ensnared. And they become very tense and very worried. So few people make it to the end of their lives happy. Even if it's been going well, they just reach a point where it begins to fall apart for them because they have misused their reason and they haven't used their lifetime to become more and more aware of a bigger reality. And though the little bird says, what else is wisdom if not to keep what is mine for myself? It's like, it feels good to have a little, it would feel better to have a lot. Why would I give it away? And even though repeatedly the bird lost everything he had, he kept thinking that it was just that he didn't quite do it well enough. And he goes out again to get more for himself. Even if you're not terribly selfish, the self is the thought that I am a separate reality. And once we become enamored of that thought, we lose the capacity to act with the full power of our Maker, because we have set an arbitrary edge to our consciousness. And then we become devotees, because eventually, bam, 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 finally you say, whoa, there must be another, I just really can't take this anymore. Don't we finally ask a more intelligent question when the suffering, it's always like this, you have to hit this balance, when the present suffering is worse than the fear of change. That's the point at which we begin to think differently. And the little bird goes through that cycle, every week in the Festival of Light. And we go through it over many incarnations. That bird's life was like eons of our time. Eons and eons. And because we've misused our reason, we've reasoned it out Gee, a little bit feels good, a lot would feel better. What else is wisdom except to keep what is mine for myself? Sense, pleasure, man, that's where it's at. All this morality stuff, they don't know what they're talking about. Whatever it might be. Intoxicants, wow, look at this. I can be so happy just by imbibing this stuff. It's the false use of reasoning. And then we find ourselves just totally in a mess because the lawful results of our false reasoning have caught up with us. And the thing that you have to realize, I'm talking about more extreme realities, but every single time there's the slightest, ripple of dissonance or unhappiness within us, it's always because in one way or another, we've allowed our consciousness to drift away from where it should be, right? And it's the lawful result of our own wrong thinking. And that doesn't mean that we can immediately turn it back. Sometimes, the momentum is there and we have to go like this. We shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. But it's very relaxing once you come to that. Because it's just like, oh yes, I got myself into this and now I'll get myself out of it. And nobody's at fault. It's just the lawful result of wrong thinking. And we can't always find that wrong thinking because sometimes it's buried too far in the past. So we just massively correct it by the example set by Master in this book. Okay? So, let me just see, because I could go on with all this forever and forever. So, yeah, we only have 3, so I think I'm going to just go on from this point. I think I've made that point enough. Yes. So now Master tells us in the beginning of this book, and this is a handout I will give you, but I won't give it to you right now. The first paragraphs of this book, of one section of this book, he tells you how to use this book. And what he gives us, what I write down here, is 9 steps for using these prayer demands. And what I would really like to encourage us to do, and we'll work with it a little bit here, is, just take upon yourself a little bit of a homework assignment. Master really encourages us to work with one whisper at a time and to really become very, very deeply engaged in the meaning and the power of that and see how far we can take our consciousness into really making that manifest in our lives. It's a very interesting and a wonderful proposition. So here are the steps that he suggests for us. He says, first of all, we need to select a demand that is reflective of our needs. And I'm just, make me a smile millionaire is one of them. And this is when we ask to be made cheerful within ourselves and a cheerful instrument for others. Without drawing too sharp a point on it, there is one called, I am thy bird of paradise, wishing to fly in thy astral airplane. And this one is actually about if you're facing death, how you should think about it and what you should do. There's another one, a beautiful one, make me thy butterfly of eternity. And this helps us to gain freedom from past errors and from guilt over things we've done in the past. It's a really exquisite one. Here's another that is for removing the cork of ignorance. If we just have a general feeling that we just need God's help to escape from the wrong thinking that we're doing. A beautiful prayer at dawn. Just bless me that with the awakening dawn, I may awaken all souls with my own. Just a prayer for divine awakening. Let me just pull out one more just to... Then just ask God to, we demand of thee as thy children. You must come to me. There's just no way you can stay away. And there's about teaching me how to deal with people who are criticizing me. I was looking for one more. That light drive darkness away. And that no matter how many difficulties we have, demand that through all tests and trials the love of God may never fade. Whatever suffering comes to me, Lord, keep me always remembering your divine consciousness. Those are just a few at random in the first part. So the first thing we need to do, and this is in order to make this effective, we need to have one of these whispers that really we have real reason to relate to it. And Master talks about how, these are words, and he says this very strongly, but the words are imbued with the Divine Spirit. Master said he spiritualized these prayers, and that within each one of these words is there like a spirit bomb that'll go off if we detonate it with our own energy. I mean, Master's images, he's always just over the top on this. Step number 2 is that we have to calm our minds. And he says, sit with a straight spine. In other words, meditate. Just get ourselves calm. Pick the whisper that you want, then get very calm. And then he said, meditate on the meaning of the demand until it becomes a part of you. Now this means obviously we're going to have to read it over and over again. Partly because sometimes the images are subtle. But also, sometimes the meaning of words is not obvious and we have to spend a deeper part in them. I am made in the image of God. I mean, what is God? What does it mean to be made like that? What is the image? Just really, Master says in another place, he said, every image that's there, understand it, then visualize it. If it's, I am the butterfly of eternity, well then you really need to just sort of see that butterfly, and you need to see the butterfly moving through all eternity. You have to really enter into the image. What Master is saying is, he experienced what he's describing. And the words are the doorway to that experience. And one of the ways we cross over into that is by the creative imagination of visualizing it. So meditate on the meaning. And the meaning we reach by visualizing the image. And then he says, saturate the demand with devotion. And then meditate on it in that way. Saturate it with devotion. What would that mean? That would mean that we express great love for the one who gave us the image. We express great love for the divine power described in that image. We would express great love and gratitude for the opportunity to expand our consciousness through this. We would be very devoted to the practice of understanding the whispers. And we would just, all of these different qualities, we would repeat and reread, or if we've memorized it, repeat in our own minds, every word saturating it with divine appreciation and love for what it is and for the power behind it. In other words, you have to completely engage the heart. You can't just pray like some people pray with, just repeating words. Oh, power of the omnipotent Lord, please come to us in our hour of need, now and at this time and in all future times. You have to feel it, that it's coming, that it's a cry from your inner self. It's not just the words. It's a cry from your inner self. And then he says, as your meditation deepens, increase your devotion, mentally offering the demand, and this is the very beautiful part, as your own heart's outburst. In other words, choose the whisper that is reflective enough of something that resonates with you. Become so deeply immersed in what the meaning of those words are, that it becomes a natural expression of your own feelings. Master writes at one point about how a lover may read poetry to his beloved, but sooner or later he speaks from his own heart. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to use Master's enlightened consciousness to bring greater depth to our own understanding, but sooner or later we have to unite ourselves with that so that the spirit described in this becomes a natural expression of our own heart. And now we have to say, imbue yourself in the faith that your heart's craving, expressed through this specific demand, is being received by God. Now this is where all the things I was saying at the beginning, which you can reread for yourself in this book, with the faith that I am God's child, and when I talk, God listens. Okay? That there's no reason at all why when I talk, God would be doing anything else but listening to me. He puts it this way: imbue yourself in the faith that your heart's craving is being received by God. Pray believing. That's how Jesus put it. And the reason we believe is not because we've begged God enough or flattered Him enough that the King will lean down and take care of us. It's because in the practice of meditation, we have connected our oneness. And therefore, whatever comes out of us, we feel it flowing into God. And it's fundamental to successful prayer to pray believing. Pray experiencing that God is with you and He is receiving what you are asking. One also has to have, therefore, the courage to feel worthy and not let your own sense of self get in the way of that. You have to lose your sense of self. To imbue yourself in the faith that He's receiving it, you have to not be self-concerned. Maybe He will, maybe He won't, maybe He likes me, maybe He doesn't. I have certainly found that success in these practices is entirely a factor of concentration. Because concentration is the capacity to put yourself in the now. I think I mentioned this when I've been listening to Swami lately, I try to listen to him as if I have no future and no past. And the only thing that's happening is the word he's speaking. Just with such concentration that whatever word he's speaking is the only reality why he's speaking it. Then there's the next word, then there's the next word, then there's the next word. So if we're reading or repeating one of these prayer demands, the power of faith comes from the power of concentration when there is no reality except the words that you're speaking. And when there's no reality but the words that you're speaking, you have this experience that a power greater than yourself is involved in that exchange. You'll see. Feel that God is listening to the silent words of your soul. This is be one with your heart's demand. That's what I was speaking of. And then I love this. Be thoroughly convinced that He has heard you. Okay? And this goes back to, I am God's child. Why would He not listen to me? Be thoroughly convinced that He has heard you. A great deal of success in prayer is just feeling that we are one with the one to whom we are praying. Then he says, go about your duties, seeking not to know whether God will grant your demand. Believe absolutely that you've been heard. Isn't that interesting? Know that what is God's is yours also. Now, that doesn't necessarily say that you will get what you ask for, but He's heard you. And what more do we need? Because if we are really disciples and children of the infinite, and we've, with our whole heart, expressed our reality, and we know that God has heard us, what else is there for us to be concerned about? Everything else is the ego trying to assert itself into that relationship. And then it says, unceasingly meditate on God. When you really feel Him, you will acquire dominion over all things. This is the promise. Okay? Now, why don't we just take one of these and just read it a little bit, and then we'll go on. Take a little break. Let's see, which one shall I use? Let's see, I marked one here. I think I'll use this one because I like it so much. It's number 3 actually. No, excuse me, it's number 34. It's on page 55. And it's make me thy butterfly of eternity. Number 34. I've certainly said a bunch of numbers. It's number 34. It's on page 55. It's number 34. Make me the butterfly of eternity, it says. I have burnt my past, destroying every seed of evil destiny. I have stridden bravely through the strewn ashes of my past and future fears. I am the eternal now, having torn to shreds my enclosing cocoon of ignorance with the sharp knife of free will. Now I am thy soaring butterfly of eternity, flitting freely through immeasurable skies of time. The beauty of my wings I spread out through nature everywhere to entertain all beings. My wings are sprinkled with suns and stardust. Lo, I am beautiful. May every silken thread that shrouded my past folly be severed forever. See, they trail now behind me, only adding to my beauty as I wing my way to my own self in thee. Isn't that fabulous? Okay, so the beginning. I have burnt my past, destroying every seed of evil destiny. Now, how many of us are burdened by thoughts of things that we should have done differently? Isn't that so? And he even says, destroying every seed of evil destiny. You know, the past lives of all men are dark with many shames. And whether or not we have conscious memories of things we've done wrong, or just a vague sense that I wish I could have done it better, right? Just imagine how that burdens us. And how much that persuades us that, well, of course, God really isn't going to come to me. Isn't that so? So he starts out by saying, I have burnt my past. And you just sort of see all of that. And I've destroyed every seed of evil destiny. Whatever bad karma I set in motion, gone. You just see how powerful that is? Every seed of evil destiny, gone. I've done it. Okay? I have stridden bravely through the strewn ashes. Now think of the strewn ashes. We've burnt it all up and now we're standing in this big mess and we've just marched right through it. The strewn ashes of my past and future fears. It kind of wipes it all out, doesn't it? I've burnt my past. I've destroyed the seeds of my evil destiny. I have marched bravely through the ashes of the mess I made, of the things I used to be afraid of, and the things that I was going to be afraid were happening in the future. Now just imagine, we're doing it quickly now, sitting upright, meditating deeply, contemplating the meaning of each one of those words, drawing that image to an absolute focus and putting our full energy behind that, with unity with God. It's over. I've burnt it. It's gone. I mean, this is a prayer, you see also. It's a prayer demand. It's an affirmation. It's a statement of divine fact that we're bringing forth by the power of our faith. And we're telling God, this is what's going to happen. See, the way he prays is you pray with dominion over all of creation. And the dominion you want to have above all is of our own consciousness, correct? So I've just wiped the slate clean. And now I am in the eternal. I am the eternal now. Past and future fears are all wiped out. Everything is gone. I am the eternal now. Having torn to shreds, let's not mince words here, torn to shreds my enclosing cocoon of ignorance with the sharp knife of my free will. Okay, we were living in past and future fears. We were bound by the mistakes of the past. We had an evil destiny around us, but we pulled out the knife, the sharp knife of our divine understanding, my free will. I'm not going to be held a prisoner. I am the infinite spirit. Whack, 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 whack. You know, and this cocoon was around us. We were trapped. Isn't that how you feel? That's how I feel. You know, just stupid thoughts, just spinning around my head, you know, fears and anxieties and worries and how am I going to deal with this? No, pull out the sharp knife of free will. Like that. Isn't that, it's just great. You're just out of it. So then what happens then is now I am the soaring butterfly. Because there you were in the cocoon, just like they are, those ugly little worms, you know, just in these cocoons. And all of a sudden, you break out of it. So make that image. You see how dynamic that image is? There you are in a little cocoon, but now you break out of it. And the more deeply you meditate on that, you see how you can just take karmic conditions and just destroy them with the sharp knife of your free will. Because now I am the soaring butterfly of eternity. You know, all of those things belong to time and space, cause and effect. I'm not part of that anymore. I've cut it to shreds. I'm the soaring butterfly of eternity. Now that's pretty limitless, isn't it? Flitting freely through immeasurable skies of time. Now that's an image to think of, isn't it? I mean, just with closed eyes, immeasurable skies of time, past, present, future. You know, I belong to eternity. I've broken out of this cocoon of ego and self and birth and death and physical body. I'm a butterfly. You know, butterflies, they're so light and they just go wherever they want to go, and everybody's always happy to see them, and they're just so marvelous. And this is an eternal butterfly. What a marvelous image, isn't it? And just crossing over immeasurable skies of time. What a fantastic image. The beauty of my wings. I'm so gorgeous now. I spread out through nature everywhere, and I love this part, to entertain all beings. It's so lighthearted, isn't it? But he brings into it, you see, he almost always does this. You're there, you're taking care of yourself, and then he reminds you to give to others. So now that you've broken out of this cocoon and you're this lovely butterfly, then you're going to also just bring a little happiness to others. Haven't you ever seen little butterflies come flitting like this? We were in Costa Rica, we went to a butterfly garden, which was basically just this big place covered with net, where they had the right flowers, but you were in there and just everywhere are these butterflies. And my, they were entertaining. You know, and they were entertaining in this light, you know, gossamer way. You know, they were just here for a while and then they were there, and then they would sort of show you their beautiful wings and then they'd close them up. You know, they were just very, very entertaining. So once we've broken out of this cocoon of ignorance, just look what fun we have, entertaining. My wings are sprinkled with suns and stardust. And then he says, lo, I am beautiful. Isn't that dear? I am beautiful. And you just sit in the privacy of your meditation and then you think, I am beautiful. You know? But we are. And because what we're seeing is we're seeing ourselves through God's eyes. You know, we think, I'm not beautiful. I mean, my eyes are too small and my nose is too big and my skin is wrinkled, or I have evil nature, or, you know, whatever it might be. But we've cut all that with the sharp knife of free will. And lo, I am beautiful. May every, and then we go back and finish it. May every silken thread, remember that old cocoon that we cut apart? That shrouded my past folly, be shredded, be severed forever. That's the prayer and the affirmation. You know, all those little bits and pieces that held me, they have cut them and they're never coming back. See, and then now we look back. They trail now behind me. You know, just like there they are. They used to be mine, but they're not anymore because I am so beautiful. But then he adds this, only adding to my beauty as I wing my way to my own self in thee. It's a very sweet touch, isn't it? That all of that difficulty, whatever it was that we had to break out of, that's what's made us who we are now, isn't it? Everything that in the past that we might have been ashamed of or didn't want to have happen, that's what made us who we are now. Trailing behind us, they only add to our beauty. Isn't that dear? You see how much fun these are if you really just pour yourself into it? So let's do it one more time. Make me thy butterfly of eternity. I have burnt my past, destroying every seed of evil destiny. I have stridden bravely through the strewn ashes of my past and future fears. I am the eternal now, having torn to shreds my enclosing cocoon of ignorance with the sharp knife of free will. Now I am thy soaring butterfly of eternity, flitting freely through immeasurable skies of time. The beauty of my wings I spread out through nature everywhere to entertain all beings. My wings are sprinkled with suns and stardust. Lo, I am beautiful. May every silken thread that shrouded my past folly be severed forever. See, they trail now behind me, only adding to my beauty as I wing my way to my own self in thee. Oh my God. That's one, and there's lots more.